Is anybody going to show up today, puppy? Maybe it's just me and the puppy today.
It's 11:59 at Radio Free America, and this is Uncle Sam with music and the truth until dawn. Right now, I got a few words for some of our brothers and sisters in the occupied zone. The chair is against the wall. The chair is against the wall. John has a long mustache. John has a long mustache. It's 12 o'clock, Americans, another day closer to victory. And for all of you out there on or behind the lines, this is your song.
Welcome, everybody, to our Daily Gun Show. Come to you live every weeknight at midnight Eastern, where we talk about guns for at least an hour, about an hour, whatever we're calling it. Good evening. Looks like it's just Anne Marie tonight. We go live for an hour. Our goal would be to go live overnight. So we have Patreon. So we have people that subscribe to what we do. And notice at the bottom of the screen here, it says thanks to the people who subscribe to our projects to make it possible for us to do what we're doing. Most people are buying us a cup of coffee once a month. Some people buy us lunch, and that adds up, and it lets us focus on our projects. So we are websites. We got lots of those. We do social content, I guess you could say, videos and posts and things like that. And then consulting and some activity in the realms of Second Amendment awareness and education. So with that, we go live every weeknight, and we've gone live for 1,500 and something episodes now. We just hit the 1,500th episode not too long ago. And the new co-host is sleeping tonight. He's been sleeping for a couple hours. And soon we'll flip it off of him and just go back over to the screen if we need to. And tonight's topic is training. We haven't talked training in a while. On Thursdays, we like to talk about training. And did that get him in focus? I think it did. We like to talk about training and travel alternatively. So if somebody wants to talk about travel, I'll be talked into it. But if we'd like to talk about training, that's what we're here for tonight. So let's start someplace, and one of the places we can start is Minuteman University, one of our projects, one of our websites. Started it in 2015 when I became the social media director, or whatever they call it, social media guy for the Arizona Citizens Defense League, a volunteer job that I took no money for, no money at all. I volunteered for that job, and for a couple of years, many years actually, I did that job, and one of the things that we talked about doing over there was putting together an educational resource. Then they didn't want to do it, so I just went ahead and built it anyway, and that's what we're going to take a look at. It's called Minuteman University. I'm going to put it up on the screen here behind the puppy. I guess we can just do this. And you can see it's on the screen here behind the puppy. And if we scroll down, let's see if I can get it to have both everybody in the screen right away. Because of the lighting, I don't think I can get everybody in the screen. So we'll have to do this. But somewhere in here, it gets down to activists and then the industry. And somewhere underneath industry there, you're going to find firearms instructors. So we can... Throughout the years, I've done these illustrations of everybody so that we have some consistency. Yes, you are not an instructor, so you're not on the screen. But we've done illustrations of a bunch of people in the industry, and in this case, firearms instructors. And I don't know how many this is, but it's quite a few, I guess, now that I'm looking at it. And we can use this as a general guideline. But here's the thing. We go live every weeknight at midnight. We're not doing this as some kind of scripted, produced video. We're not trying to impress everybody or create a bunch of views or fame or fortune. Although I could handle some fortune, that'd be nice. But we're really just trying to get information across. So, and do it on the internet. And using the interactive nature of the internet, there we go. Puppy's finally in his little nesty thing. He can calm down. And up behind him is where I'm looking at the comments here. So people that are joining us live, which is just Wesley and Anne Marie tonight, feel free to ask any questions you want about training, and I'll be watching them up here. Otherwise, let's just use the template or outline here on as a list of firearms instructors here. And I don't think, let's see, I did actually start to explore the history of firearms instruction, but I don't know how much of it I posted on the website here. So in addition to the firearms instructors, I have shooting schools listed here, doing research for various projects over the years. Did some dives into some of these areas or realms of the firearms industry, right? And I guess I did post some of my bullet point notes over here. So that's what I'll be using. And I'll just take and link to both of these pages. So here's a link to the one set of notes we'll be using tonight. And that is, this one is the laws, or I mean the schools. And then this other one will be a link to the instructors. So the instructors give you a pretty good idea of who we're talking about, who did the stuff we're going to be talking about. But the stuff that we're talking about is the evolution of firearms instruction. It's kind of neat. And there are a couple of there we go, videos out there that attempt to cover the history of firearms instruction, but they're difficult. To be nice about it, they're difficult to deal with. You got to be have a martial mindset and not be skittish, because most of the people are talking to other firearms people, and these are firearms people that are either getting instructed or being instructed, so they're not holding any punches, let's say, and they're not being they're not using much grace or etiquette when they're describing most of the stuff. Let's put it that way. So there are some things, some resources out there, but in a nutshell, the bullet points of it all is that when you think about guns existing, they started out as cannons, and then those cannons got smaller and smaller, and then as they got smaller, started holding them as a hand cannon, and that was the original single-shot Derringers or single-shot pistols, and they were designed to be large enough to have enough metal to hold the expanding gases to let the projectile get far enough and fast enough with enough mass to be useful, especially as a device. Oop, here's that bag of stuff in that thing the other day I'm not supposed to talk about on YouTube, so I got a thing kicked off. I want to make sure nothing gets seen by YouTube. So you had the evolution of firearms. They go from single shot, flintlock, black powder, that kind of stuff, muzzle loaders, and then eventually you get to some muzzle loading revolvers, right? You get some chambers revolving around a cylinder, and then eventually you get to bored through. In fact, we're about to come up on the anniversary of the guy who invented the bored through cylinder, Roland White. And once you get the bored through cylinder, thanks to Smith & Wesson, you get the 22 short, you get cartridges, right? So you got these cartridges, and eventually you get semi-autos, and thanks to Browning, he takes us from single shot guns through lever actions into full auto, back to semi-auto, and then somewhere in there he created the pump and a couple other actions, right? So you've got all these different types of evolutions of guns, and somewhere in there you start to see a little bit of evolution of how we shoot these guns, primarily between the types of guns. When you go from black powder muzzleloaders and you get into revolvers, there's going to be some differences because of you load them differently, right? You're also going to hold them differently because they're less prone to blowing up in your face. You're less concerned about a catastrophic accident. So now you're not holding the gun way out in front of your face like they did in the old days. Now you can pull the gun from the holster and shoot right by your belly because you're not worried about having to hold the gun way out in front of you. And that might be the 1918 somethings through the 1920s and 30s even. So then you start to get semi-autos, and you're bringing two hands together to load magazines and to insert magazines and to drop magazines, and you've got two hands together every once in a while on a revolver to reload. And then eventually once and I guess I should mention that all through this time, there's very little instruction for firearms other than manual of arms, how to clean the things, how to carry them without shooting each other. For conscripts, for people who are drafted into the military, people are going to be using firearms to go into battle. And when they're marching and stuff, they're going to be given some instruction on how to not shoot each other or hurt each other during drill when they're marching around the bases and forts and stuff. And then when they're transferring themselves to battle, and then once they're in battle, they have some kind of a awareness of the chaotic downrange type of situations. And then again, there's very little instruction other than marksmanship instruction, and then some counseling on till you see the whites of their eyes, but very little actual formal marksmanship instruction. And it's probably because the guns weren't all that great up until a certain point. In other words, they weren't going to get much performance anyway. And then not that many people really were into them, I think. It's hard to know because we weren't alive back then. But we certainly know that there weren't any manuals, there weren't any schools, there weren't any instructors. There were people that knew how to shoot good. There was the Annie Oakleys and a whole bunch of other people who could shoot good. And they could teach other people. And they did instruct people, but each their own. And back then, it would be a lot more of like, hold the gun up and shoot the wood. Nope, shoot the wood. Nope, quit missing the wood and shoot the wood. They wouldn't really know how to instruct you as much as tell you what not to do, from what I understand. But there was not much written down, so it's hard to know. Then you get eventually you start to get military manuals, and the military starts to write things down. The police start to get guns in the 1900s, and then they start to create manuals at some point, the larger police departments. And then you get the police in California starting to have competitions. Let's see. Am I missing anything? The first canine training was in 1907. You got in 1920 Fairbairn and Sykes. I don't know how to say their names right, but they meet up in Singapore. In 1916, they created a crime library. In 1921, they started bringing out lie detectors. In 1921, you started getting on a database for collecting crime data at a national level. Let's see. In 1934, Congress first gave agents the authority to carry firearms. And why do you think that was? Because of Prohibition. In 1938, the FBI has a practical pistol course, a PPC. So in 1934, FBI starts to give their federal agents guns for the first time because of Prohibition created organized crime. So interesting. So we can see that FBI has a pistol course. In 1942, Shooting to Live was published. And I probably should have linked to that one. Shooting to Live is Sykes and Fairbairn. Okay, so These two dudes are police, and they go to Singapore and they get in tons of fist fights and gun fights and knife fights. Lots of them. Lots of them. And by 1942, they're like world experts on street fighting. And then World War II happens, and they teach everybody in the OSS how to street fight. And that's how the French knife the shit out of Nazis and whatnot. So that's how everybody starts to learn how to shank everybody and fight dirty, so to speak, break people's tracheas and just bleed them out. All the fun stuff you learn when you're really killing people. So that stuff starts to become an art form in 42. In 56, the NRA starts reinstates Camp Perry, which hadn't existed since like the 1700s or something, like the early 1900s. The national matches start in 1900. So it isn't until 1956 that those start again. So they crapped out at some point. You get the modern canine for the police in 1956. And let's see, NRA Police Firearms Instructor Certification Program was introduced in 1960, right? So somewhere in there, I would think, is when we start to see, let's start to bring in some of their stuff. So I'm just kind of going through some police stuff, but that gives you an idea of like the introduction and the pace at which police get into it. And now, what happened to my other thing? We're going to go back to, come on, man. I thought I had, all right, whatever. I'm just going to open up the instructor thing over here. Oh, I'm not screen sharing, am I? You're just looking at a dog this whole time. All right, so we're going back to the instructors. I'm going to cross-reference. I'm actually looking at this screen. So I'm going to cross-reference the instructors' bios. So you get Church and Wingate and the other guy. And these are the guys that create the NRA in the 1700s. And these people, these three dudes, well, two of them, right, co-found Galaxy magazines, which was published by, or which published Mark Twain back in the olden days. And then this guy starts the National Rifle Association, right? And then meets with Wingate, and they decide to create military manuals on marksmanship. And this is 1871. So I shouldn't say 1700. It's 1871. So pre-1900, these guys are out there going, let's create the NRA in marksmanship. Let's create military marksmanship. Ed McGivern is an exhibition shooter. So he's a dude who's Annie Oakley. And then, he ran around shooting things fast. Then you get Sykes and Fairbairn. There's those guys that go to Singapore and learn how to knife fight. You get Elmer Keefe, who comes along, and what's his deal? He was an inspector at the Utah Arsenal, the Ogden Arsenal in Utah, and he inspected most of the Garens, I guess, during World War II. And then he, of course, invented the 357, the 44, and the 41 Magnum, but he's not much. Let's see. Then you get Cooper, and that's what I was looking for. So in 1941, Cooper's in the Marines, and of course, he learns the Sykes and Fairbairn way of fighting. Then he starts in 1957 the shooting competitions in California. So if we compare that back here to the police stuff, the police didn't get the NRA firearms instructor certification until 1960. So sometime before the NRA even started doing police certification. So potentially there was just a bunch of regional or city department level certifications out there, probably with little uniformity. I don't know if there was any need for it because people were still figuring out if, that training was a thing. You get Jeff Cooper out here doing the shooting competitions, and somewhere in those shooting competitions, people start to get worried about being better at shooting. And I don't know if people just didn't care before that, or if this is when people just started writing it down. And Jeff Cooper obviously wrote everything down. So, you get the Southwest Pistol League, and somewhere in there in the 1950, right around 60, that's when Weaver started pulling out his gun, his pistol, his revolver actually, and then using two hands and shooting with an isosceles or his Weaver stance and winning. And then everybody goes, "Oh, you can put two hands together on a pistol," and that is one point in the evolution of people writing stuff down. Because as soon as people started putting two hands together on the gun, you became, "Oh, I'm going to do that," or "I'm not going to do that." Right now, you had your first rift. Like literally, the beginning of training was just catalyzing, was just becoming a crystallizing, and then at the same time, the rift started. "Oh, I'm not going to put two hands together. That's crazy. Well, I'm going to put two hands together because that's faster. It worked better." So that's where you start to see the beginning of what we have today. So Jeff Cooper, and I don't see, I was trying to chart this. So Cooper is doing the shooting competitions, figures out that there's ways to get better, starts to get into that. And he's also a writer and everything. So he comes out with, he helps create the IPSC and starts a pistol school. And of course, I don't write when he started the pistol school on here. Great. So he founded Gunsight in 1976, American Pistol Institute. So in 60 or so, he was there, kind of created, fostered the development of modern pistol craft. And then by 76, he buys the property and starts Gunsight. The first instructors at Gunsight are hanging out and seeing that there's a type of instruction and there's a mindset and strategy and tactics and everything else for 1911s, predominantly some revolvers. And then, because everybody had gone from single action revolvers to some double action revolvers, and then a bunch of people jumped to 1911s, and then some people went to Wonder 9s, but not very many. And then this was at that point, so most people are carrying around 1911s or some kind of revolver, and those first instructors either break off or decide to wander. So instead of being instructors at the school permanently, and I don't know what the details are there, it'd be interesting to have somebody who knows tell you, or have somebody who doesn't know ask the people involved, because most of them are still kicking. And for some reason, some of those first instructors took off or just started to wander and did instruction. And some of those people we know today: Ken Hackathorn, Masada Ayub, Clint Smith. So the first instructors are the people who we know today as being the granddaddies of this whole thing. And then those guys took off into Four Corners and started to instruct in different places. And then they were instructing cops and military and regular people who were either in competition or just interested in this whole thing. They were writing books, all of them, and people were reading those books. And then in the how would they have done it back in the day? Meeting up and going to competitions, things like IPSC and other things that were competitions were more important back then because there were no forums, but people would go to these forums and they would develop and learn and watch from each other and go home and practice and remember incorrectly and practice something differently than what was really being done. And, things evolved and just happened in a different pace and in a different way until you started to get to newsletters and get more get-togethers and more established books and journals and magazines and stuff, and then eventually the internet, TV shows probably, and then the internet. So you get all this kind of stuff in the different let's say arts, the different styles. Somebody shoots, I think one of the best ways to describe it is Chris Costa, who has a unique way of instruction. He'll explain it. I'm going to try to summarize it. He'll explain it that if you have, let's go grab Chris from the lister. If you've got 3 seconds to take a shot, Chris is going to suggest that you get into position in less than a second so that you got 2.5 seconds to aim. Does that make sense? where somebody else might say take 2 seconds to get into position so that you can take your best quick shot. So people are going to have different opinions and different ways of doing stuff, right? So we've got these instructors. They're out there doing their different things, and that's where Cooper turns into Tom. Well, these aren't all from Cooper, but I think Ken Hackathorn, Pat Rogers, Louis Arbach, Masada Ayub, Clint Smith, Ed Head, and I don't know about John Farnham, but all of these guys are all from Jeff Cooper. And then, yep, inspired by Jeff Cooper. So, either inspired or worked for Jeff Cooper. And then you get things along the way like the holsters are developed, first leather and then Kydex hybrids. You get flashlights and all the techniques that we have today probably originated in that time between the 60s, 70s, and then 80s and 90s when the internet started. And that's when you get this group of instructors coming out, right? And this group of instructors taught a bunch of cops and taught a bunch of competition shooters, and then they taught a bunch of some military people. And then what happened? Well, 9/11, and then the global war on terror started to happen. So now you have soldiers who are actually doing stuff instead of peacetime for a lot of years during, after Cooper teaches all these guys, there's peacetime everywhere. Nobody's doing nothing anywhere. People with experience had experience from Vietnam, like Pat Rogers. People had experience from like the Korean War era, right? That kind of stuff. Like nobody had any real wartime except for maybe the war on drugs. So now you get the war on drugs. And what do you got there? A lot of cops who are getting tons of experience. So think of somebody like Pat Rogers who had military experience and then just tons of SWAT experience in New York, tons of SWAT raids in New York during peacetime decades, Cold War era. So you've got the most of your experience coming from law enforcement, and it's either border patrol, immigration, or war on drugs. And then maybe a couple of other things, a lot of training in things like nuclear protection and other things, but very little actual stuff happening because it's peacetime. So you get a lot of people who are learning from old experience with the technology that's changing. They're developing technology. So Ken Hackathorn and Pat Rogers and Jeff Cooper all also created IPSC or IDPA. So while there's no wars, there's no experience being made on a battlefield, and there's very little experience being made in law enforcement, they're gaining experience through training and then through scenario type of stuff. So somewhere in here, these instructors start to hate each other, like each other, learn from each other, respect each other, and they all have a mutual understanding because they're all kind of in a finite world here for a long time. Then you start to get some other, just from time and other experiences. Your competition shooters. George Thompson is verbal judo. Dennis Tueller is the 21-foot rule. Law enforcement wrote an article. Glock armor instructor, and becomes part of the industry in a whole big way. Craig Douglas is South narcotics officer who teaches hand-to-hand knives and stuff. You got Kathy Jackson, the cornered cat. So you got all these people who are coming in from different levels of experience that are different than this first crew and kind of the middle generation. You got Marty Hayes, career as law enforcement, becomes an attorney, starts the Armed Citizens Legal Defense Network. So you've got all these different people. Rick Ector. Not Rick Ector. What was I looking at? Oh, I guess I don't have Ken Blanchard in here. But you get this era that's probably in their prime in the 90s. Then what's happening? Those law enforcement are out there getting experience. The military are getting experience, and they're coming out. How long are you in one of those roles? You're coming out of those roles, And now you start to get your Chris, your what's his face, who worked with Chris over at Magpul. Steve wasn't in, but he's that age. So you start to get this next level of guys who had been in and may had a little bit of experience, and then get out and start to instruct as apprentices, I guess, or the student instructors of some of these guys. And now some of these guys are passing, and most of these guys are still either instructing or starting to slow down. Then you get the people who are coming out of the Global War on Terror who've had the experience of training with this group, let's say. Get Uncle Sam paid them to learn with some of these guys, and then they came out and learned with some of these guys, or maybe paid some of their own money to work with some of these guys and gals, and then decided, okay, I'm going to throw my hat in the ring too. And I don't have that many of these in here, but there's a lot. This is not an all-inclusive list. There's a lot in this realm. And what you also get out of this realm is all the swell of CCW carriers. You get the different states that are getting CCW, then they're getting constitutional carry, and they're getting open carry, and there's political and social stress and influence for fear, and people are starting to buy firearms and taking classes and being more comfortable. You get the DC Project, which is and the other female focused organizations that are reducing the barrier to new gun owners all over the place, just all over the place. So the next level, starting in like 2015, you have a wave of Global War on Terror. You've got a new wave you had the initial wave of female instructors who learned from the very few initial female instructors. And now you've got legions of competent female instructors coming out of projects like Girl and a Gun with Robin Sandoval's project, or Armed Women of America now. So lots and lots of, I don't know what to call it now, just there's competency that there's never been. There's, I don't want to say diversity because that seems lame, but there's people carrying in all different kinds of ways and all different kinds of scenarios and for all different kinds of reasons. And there's people that can give competent instruction to those folks. And then there's tons of bad instruction. There's always been bad instruction, but there has to be, if there's always 10% bad instruction, there has to be so much more now because there's just so much training in general. So that's a kind of a rundown of where we're at with where we got. So it all kind of started in the 50s, and we're, so it's kind of our lifetime. At least people that are a little bit older than me, they could literally have lived through most of at least modern firearms development, at least firearms training development. And it gets pretty interesting, and it is possible to see it all. Now, I haven't found a book that covers it all. Part of one of my projects is going to be to try to summarize all of this, to put it from the bird's eye view. So I think it is kind of interesting. It also, a lot of people have weird opinions. There's people that hate training, and I don't know if training hurt them or it hit them a bunch of times when they were younger, or if they stepped on some piping hot training at one point, and they've just been averse to it their whole lives. But for some reason, people have real interesting opinions about it. And it's, of all the things I've done in firearms, it's one of the more interesting aspects of it. The people that are involved are both some of the biggest D-nozzles out there, and then some of the most respectable people I've ever met. Like literally some of the best people I know are instructors. So they definitely run the gambit. So for people to suggest that they're all bad or something, just I don't understand. So every once in a while, I attempt to do something like this, to go through, I guess it's only taken a half an hour this time, to kind of go through and attempt to summarize my understanding of where we are with firearms instruction. Now, there must be some other levels to this, the Olympic level instruction. I'm sure they were handing down tips and tricks and stuff to each other over the years. After all, the Olympics, the modern Olympics started with firearms. So there's always been firearms events in the Olympics, all those different shooting sports. The NRA, the NRA and their marksmanship training started in 1870s, and it did continue all the way through. Some of our oldest organizations at the state level are rifle and pistol associations. All right, well, I said if people wanted to participate, I ranted there for a bit, but we're not seeing a lot of participation tonight. Apologize for everybody that might have showed up last night. Real IRL, as the kids would say, in real life got in the way. So I got some real questions. Okay, so I found a question here. We'll start starring them. And let's see. Just two? If anybody has any other questions, I'm done ranting now. So feel free to put in any questions you might have. Woods is wrong. The sky is falling, so don't listen to Woods. He doesn't even know. So Anne-Marie asked earlier, oh man, just made it go away. Since I'm a newbie, should I practice drawing, standing, sitting, laying down, all scenarios? So, I mean, it's like driving a car, or it's like, I guess it's like driving a car, for me at least. Maybe like riding a bike. I don't know how, that's too long ago for me to remember, but it's like getting responsibility for something for the first time. You want to feel like you're mastering it. And you want to take it seriously for sure, but you're going to want to master it, and it's just not possible, So as an adult, it's carrying around a firearm for the first time, you've had experience doing other things for the first time. It's going to take you some time to get super comfortable with it. So I would give yourself some amount of time to get comfortable with it. I'm going to try to chart this. I don't know if this answers your question or if this is just a tangent, but as far as I know, there's only one other question. So I'm going to take some time to do something I've been wanting to do. And I don't know if this is going to work or not. So I'm going to try doing it on the cheap, and we'll see if it works. But I'm just going to open up a Word document here, wherever I can find it, and shove it back over here. And I think there's a progress, or like there's a flow chart. Oh, I probably should use some kind of cool flow chart software. There's a number of options that you're going to go through. Is it good over? Why have I gone so much? Do we? I think we've done this before though. So you are thinking about buying a gun, or owning a gun, right? Or maybe you came from always had other people's guns in the house, right? So coming from one of those kind of options, and then you finally make a decision to buy your first one. And, some people are going to make this decision. Some people are going to ask. Some people are going to research. Some people are just going to gamble, right? Some people are going to listen to a salesman because they know better. They live there or they work there. Some people are going to just do it off of cost or budget, I guess. Right? So there's going to be all these different reasons why somebody purchases it in the first place. And I guess somewhere in here, there's also, man, I'm getting this thing all spelled wrong. It's freaking me out. Okay, so I don't know if I should put in here the reasons why somebody's going to get one, but you're going to get one out of fear. Maybe you're going to get one out of an investment. Can't imagine how many people. I don't think people understand how many people buy guns just because they know they're going to be worth something in the future. And they're a cool thing to own, and you can go buy it and own it, and it's got a serial number on it right away. So there's just a lot of people that buy guns and never even shoot them. So there's the investment. There's probably other reasons, right? So there's going to be these reasons why people get it, and then they finally get their first one, right? And then some people are gonna shoot it, And then some people are going to probably just store it someplace, right? Those investment people that weren't comfortable in the first place. I'm going to just say store it, I guess. So, you're going to buy the thing, and then some people are going to do different things once you've got it. So I guess what I'm trying to get at is people got all these different reasons to want to buy one. And then the one thing they all have in common is they buy their first gun. So some people are going to buy it at a store, and they're going to make sure they got paperwork on it, and they're going to ask all the questions, and they're going to make sure that they have everything figured out before they do it, and it's going to be a big deal, and they're going to make sure that they read a bunch of stuff about it. And then other people are going to do some other version. Some people are going to go to the extreme of like, oh, I'm going to make sure I buy one from my friend or something. I'm going to buy one from an ad. I don't want to make sure there's no paperwork on it. I don't want anybody to know I got this gun. It's going to, I can't let my spouse know, or my kids or my parents or whatever it might be. I'm going to buy this thing. I can't let my employer know. I can't let my little puppy know, right? Who knows what the person's deal is. That being said, I don't think I have the puppy cam on here right now. Wait, do I not have? Oh, I can't have the puppy cam when I'm just using my cam. I wonder the puppy cam couldn't come up. All right, so like I say, there's going to be all these different reasons why people get one, and then somewhere in there, I'm not going to go too far on a tangent here, other than to say, like, I've been trying to come up with this way to visualize this thing, because then once you buy this gun, you're going to go on your journey, right? So like I say, you're going to initially do whatever you're going to do, and then some people are going to buy more guns, right? And some people are going to never buy another gun again. They're going to sell it and never buy one again. Some people are going to keep it, and then they got their gun, and they're gun experts, right? There's all these different ways of doing it. So I think that knowing that, the reason I'm explaining all this, knowing that there's like a ton of different things to do, there is no way. There's no thing to do with it. I don't even know, you'd have to know somebody pretty well to say, here's what you should do, right? So as far as the answering the question there, at the pace that you find it appropriate, do more than what most people are going to suggest to do. So I am trying to say, yeah, for sure. Do all those things, but don't do them right away. There's no need to do them right away, because there's no need to do them. In reality, most people are never going to need to use a gun, ever, unless you want to go shooting with it or something. But as far as like a defensive thing, that's like lightning. Like, unless you live in circumstances that are different than the norm, you're never going to need this thing. Now, if you are one of the people that are affected by the outlying situation where you might need it, then having the ultimate amount of knowledge and skill would be great, right? So let's talk about driving. Everybody who's listening to this probably owns a car. If you don't own one, you can own one. You just choose not to, right? Literally. Or for some reason, you're decided not to own one right now. But for the most part, everybody who is listening to this can own a car, or does own a car. You might own more than one car. At least over the years, you've owned more than one car. And if you started owning your car like a lot of us did when you're young, right, little kid, then you either took that level of responsibility very seriously, or you took it very recklessly. Like an old person would have said, you're reckless, right? So that's your experience with your car. I can guarantee you, I'm almost positive I'm going to win this bet. No one has gone out and gotten extra car training. No one has gotten any kind of car defensive driving. No one, unless you had to, has gone to any kind of legal driving situation. And where do most accidents come from? Cars. Where does most lawsuits and legal stuff come from? The results of car accidents. Where do we walk around with our fragile mammal skin bodies with breakable skeletons in them, and we just walk around without any kind of barriers, next to cars that are driven by 16-year-olds who are listening to phones, who are playing on the phones. And we don't care about that. We go, they're got to be responsible, not break, not run into us or the old lady or the little kids. Like, we live in a world where we're so accustomed to massive awareness and abilities that we fall to the BS marginalization, the moving of the Overton window, that guns are the most dangerous thing on the planet, and that even considering wanting a gun makes you evil. That's either ultimate naive, like they can use the excuse that they're completely ignorant, like ignorant to the point that they're useless in society because they have such a lack of awareness, or they're lying to everybody and they understand that knives and poison and gravity and vicious animals and poisonous animals are all part of every day, and that every single one of us lives in more danger from our vehicles than anything else. So, to answer the question, we should all be getting defensive driving classes. We should at least watch videos on how to be better drivers. We should all know how to drive in rain and in a dust storm and in a blizzard, even though we don't drive in those, right? So that's what I'm getting at. Firearms instruction, firearms training is super cool. Like, literally. Like, let's say you're gonna any part of firearms training is either military or police surplus. It comes from military or police developing it. A little tiny bit of it is from competition shooting, and all of it gets recycled into competition shooting, but it all gets honed on the battlefield or where the SWAT teams are doing their thing, which is essentially a battlefield. So it all gets honed in combat, right? And then it comes back to go to instructors, and then they take the pieces that can apply to defensive or to get off of me type of scenarios, right? So everything we're learning is military surplus. And like I just kind of tried to explain there, the military surplus is not like in the olden days where it was like, well, back in World War II, they did it this way. And honestly, in World War II, it was either cut somebody so that they bleed into their own lungs so that it doesn't leave a big mess, right? And that you kill that sentry and move on with the world, right? That's not quite how you're going to dispatch somebody when they're trying to rob you. So some of that World War II stuff is interesting, but it doesn't quite apply to the rules of engagement of a regular human. You don't kill somebody for trying to rob you. You can tell them to get away from you, and you can stop them from hurting you, right? But you're not doing some of the stuff that the OSS was doing in war times. So anyhow, so some of the stuff you're not going to apply, but a lot of the stuff isn't anywhere near that. It's just it's the basics over and over and over. It's the basics 8 times a night. It's the basics when all hell breaks loose and it's chaos. It's the basics when it's boredom and you have to immediately get called to action. It's just the basics until you can't do it wrong. And that part of it is infinitely fascinating to hear 6 different people. And I'll use the analogy that I've used before. If you're going to learn from somebody in the Navy, they're going to point their guns up because they're scared of poking a hole in their boat. But if you're going to learn from somebody in the Army, we're going to point our guns down because we don't want to shoot our helicopters' engines, right, which are up in the air. Neither one of us is wrong. It's just that we got taught different stuff, right? So the parts that you can learn from people are super neat. Some people, here, let's go through the list here and take a look at some of the instructors that have existed. We start out with, we can look at this in a question. We start off with, see, there's no way to cram him and the pictures into the same thing. Just can't be done. So we started off with Colonel and General, right, from Civil War or whatever it was. And then the 1870s, they start NRA and marksmanship training. And then you get some of these guys who are instructors. Sykes and Fairbairn teach the Marines and everybody else how to dispatch everybody. And then World War II ends with their help. You get Jeff Cooper, coming along and teaching or creating an environment where people learn how to shoot with two hands, and all the modern pistol stuff takes us from revolvers to modern pistols. Michael Harries is bringing up a flashlight and using a flashlight with the firearm. Tom Gibbons is range master, was a incubator for instructors at a time when that was necessary. Pat Rogers, a traveling instructor, bringing competent carbine and pistol fighting to the masses, so to speak, to lots and lots of law enforcement out there. Ken Hackathorn, competition guy. Louis Arbrock from South Africa, shotgun guy, I think. I don't know. Asada Ayub bringing his expert witness and like author level, expert level. I don't know how to say it. Like get information transfer, just at another level. I haven't been to one of Clint Smith's stuff, but I think you've seen enough of Clint Smith's videos and stuff to get an understanding of what a character he is. Totally competent carbine instructor. Ed, John, again, these are instructors who come from the schools of Jeff Cooper and are bringing that mindset through the years, right? Like anybody can be old and remember the old ways, but somebody who sticks with it and keeps going through the Wonder Nines and all the students bring in little stupid 380s and the Caltex and everything else and still instructing, like that's where you get these guys. Again, Craig Douglas doing grappling and knife work and like once the fight turns into a street brawl, you got Dennis Tueller trying to stop you from that, keeping awareness and trying to an understanding at 21 feet, you know, how far away that could be. George Thompson is all about verbal judo, how to de-escalate, how to be aware and use verbal to stop the thing from even happening. I forget what Ron Avery's thing is. He a shoot fast guy? I feel like he's a shoot fast guy. I don't know what all these new guys are. Rob Latham is another one who shoots fast. Of course, Rick Ector's a whole nother thing, just, you know, instructing females and people in Detroit for decades now. Chris, just a super cool dude, did a ton of cool stuff. And then out there being a total character, able to be a massive character at a time when other people would have been crushed by the way the internet was. Without Chris, in a different world, without Chris, we'd have a different, meaner internet that bullies wouldn't have been slapped back. I don't know how many people know what I'm talking about, but there's Chris is a singularity as far as just owning the abuse, the bullies on the internet. Just really interesting dude. I didn't put James's up here ever because I know him too much and I can't. Steve's is the same way. Same with Chris. All of these people that I know, I don't do good cartoons of people that I know. So I never put James up here. But James is, again, completely, you know what I mean? Like totally different environment than back in the day. Jeff Cooper had a big following and had a what's the word, a curriculum, or like I think curriculum, like a method of teaching that, you know, his are the 4 color codes of mental awareness. Like his are the 4 rules of gun, or the 5 color codes are his. The 4 gun safety rules are Jeff Cooper. He invented all that stuff. We use all that stuff. So there's a bunch of people that understand that Jeff was like on the ball. He knew what he was talking about, and they kept his methods and his drills and stuff and his mindset going. And then you've got, like I tried to mention here, a bunch of different people doing different things. You know, James is coming in from the 90s through again, same way with Chris. Like just the internet would be different. The world would be different if we didn't have James and Chris doing their thing, because we'd have people like Pincus and others that doing their thing. It would be a different place. So James, again, mindset, tactics, wait, mindset, skill, tactics, gear. No, mindset, tactics, skill. I forget which one's mindset. I can't remember if tactics or skill came first, but mindset and then gear last. And every single thing that they did over there at Tactical Response was with that mindset. This total uh, Book of the Five Rings. So again, this is the kind of stuff that I can't recommend enough. Taking this kind of stuff, the stuff I can't even tell you. I would need an hour to tell you the level of nuance, the level of stuff you're going to learn from a tactical response class, and how that would be different than what you're going to get at a Chris Costa class. James's class, or I guess the tactical response classes, are about challenging your mindset. Are you even really a gun fighter? Like, are you? Yeah, that was a challenge. You accomplished something coming through a tactical response. Chris, he's more of a different thing. He's teaching somebody who already is competent as a gun shooter to think about it as a 3-second scenario, and if you can get to a stable shooting situation in 1 second, then you get 2 seconds to evaluate and shoot. And if you don't think of it that way, then you got to think of it as how long does it take you to get to the ground, and then how long do you get left to shoot. And it's just a different mindset, a different way of thinking about it. So you go into to do something with Rick is going to be at a whole different level, but honestly, the instruction is going to be the same: trigger, sights, breathing, decision making. That's about it. So whether you're doing that with a martial attitude, whether you're doing that with a time, ergonomic, that kind of thing, or whether you're doing it to empower ladies who are experiencing something for the first time, right? Like, everybody's got these different, uh, different things that they're different layers of it, different areas of it. So getting into training is infinitely interesting. So it's more like it's a lot like learning guitar or learning martial arts. Some of these are teaching karate, some of them are teaching kung fu, some of them are teaching taekwondo, some of them got swords, and some of them are like the Karate Kid, right? But you don't have to learn it all. It's just that they're all different, and they're not all good. Some of them are lame, right? Some of them are suck. But for the most part, there's a lot to learn here. And if you're not satisfied with one, or you've gotten enough of one, you can go try something else. Or if you just want to sample a bunch of things, there's like that option. But when all's said and done, it's a lot like martial arts or guitar, because you're going to get better and better and better. And if you know how to do judo and karate and taekwondo, whenever you go to learn MMA or something, you're going to be really good at it. Like, if you've already learned guitar and you've learned Spanish guitar and jazz guitar and rock and roll, when you go to learn blues, you're going to have a pretty good idea. You probably already know most of it, right? So it's that kind of thing. There's a lot of fun out there. Now there's the level of, let's say it's martial arts, or let's say it's, because it is martial arts, but let's say that it's music. You go to a bunch of different guitar instructors and take a bunch of different guitar classes. More than likely, you're going to meet a whole bunch of different guitar players who are also interested in playing guitar all the time, or are interested in talking to people about done to any length of time. You're going to find people that are at the same pace and at the same place you are. So that's the fun part about training. And the people that never go and only see it from the outside are hand picking horrible examples or lame stuff, and then they ram that around like if that's all there is, and it's not. It's the same as it's a lot of things with guns. Start talking about the ranges. Each one of these instructors either travels to and from a range, or they have their own range. So if we look at these shooting schools again, we looked at the kind of the history of police training there. But if we start to look at the schools, we got Camp Perry, which 300 acres, opened up in 1906. There were ones before that, but they don't exist anymore. Then you got Gunsight, That was Cooper's. That's 3,000 acres out here in Arizona, started in 1976. You got the Mid-South Institute, that is from 1981. You got Masad Ayub started Lethal Force Institute in 1981, 4 years before the Olympic shooting became USA shooting. Rogers School was established in 1986. Insight Thunder Ranch, 93. The 6 Hour Academy opened in 96. Rangemaster opened in 96 with Tactical Response opened in 96. Front Sight, all these opened in 96, right? Academy, I think that's Blackwater. You got Universal Shooting Academy. These are all ranges, and these all are, well, these all represent, I guess, what I'm looking for. Either an instructor or a couple of instructors, or like they are a place that instructors can show up at. Because a couple of these instructors don't have a permanent place, and then a couple of them only go to their own permanent place. So anyway, so once you start getting into training, now you can go to places. You start to go to cool places to do these classes. You meet cool people at the classes, and then you learn cool stuff, from the class. Now when you go to the range, you're not wasting ammo. Like if I wanted to go shoot ammo right now, I got like 1,000 drills. I've probably forgotten more drills that are useful than some people are ever going to try to even learn drills. So some people go to the range and they try to shoot at the center of the target. Or maybe they go to the range and they try to shoot the center of the target a little bit quicker. Or maybe they go to the range and they draw and shoot at the center of the target. There's a lot more than that. So you're going to go to these classes. You're going to experience the basics, which is the stuff we already talked about. And then you're going to see the ways that the instructors get this information across, the types of people who show up and experience the community, at least that part of the community to some extent. And then you start to go to the range, and when you're at the range and you're practicing a drill from XYZ or some strategy you learned from somebody else, or something you read about that somebody else is doing, and now somebody else at the range says, "Hey, what are you doing over there?" You either start a conversation, or turns out the person you're talking to at the range was an alumni at some other school. One of the coolest things with anything, if we were talking about music, if we were talking about anything, the way you learn is to teach. So going to classes and experiencing firearms education, you end up understanding how to teach, right? You've at least you'll experience methods of teaching. And when you go home to your spouse, your parents, your kids, your friends, whoever it is, now you can attempt, and the first times it's going to be sloppy and shitty, but you're going to attempt to relay what you learn. And as you go to more classes, or as you have more time on the clock, you're just going to get better and better at that. So now you go to a class and you come home from the class and you're teaching 2 or 3 friends what you learned at the class, and you're going to get better and better at that. They're going to get more and more from your instruction. You're going to reinforce what you learned even more and more. I could get into it. Going to classes, taking your classroom notes, sending them to yourself as certified mail so that you sign for them and then never open them. Having that as being admissible in court, and allowing a competent instructor to instruct your jury. So now they're literally a jury of your peers. People don't talk about the long-term repercussions of preparation and awareness. So that's what we're really talking about. Ultimately, taking massive responsibility for what we're talking about here. Real awareness of the implications of everything, and then once understanding that, having some fun with the depth of what all there is. Like I say, there's different types of guns, there's different ways to do them, and then over time, instead of getting watered out and gross and like weak soup, it's gotten we've had more and more flavors added and more ingredients put in. And instead of everybody separating and being standoffish, people train with each other, and the SEALs are learning from the little old ladies, and the little old ladies are learning from the I don't know, the cops, and this and there's learning from that, and this is learning from that. So it's not everywhere, not always, but a lot of them are. And then there's people who are in professional students, the people that the same way that you're probably listening to this and you listen to a couple of people when you watch the internet or whatever. You listen to a couple of people on your podcast. There's people that go to instruction, that go to firearms classes like that. And it might not be forever, but it might be for a few years. And those people that are that part of our community, that part of our industry, that are the students, I don't want to say professional students, because some people literally do get paid to go to classes. If you're in a department or in some kind of a unit and you're getting paid to go to a class, I guess you're technically a professional student. But there's people that just find so much interest and such value in taking firearms instruction or going to firearms instruction that they become a significant portion of that part of our industry. And I can tell you, there were years where we wouldn't be in the place we were today if it weren't for software engineers and doctors and a couple of pilots who would fill classes for people who were traveling instructors so that they could do all the things we just talked about. Practice their trade, develop and learn. For every class that had 6 software developers, doctors, and pilots in it, it would have 12 Border Patrol guys in it. And the 12 Border Patrol guys might not be able to attract the class, at whatever rate they're paying, but the people paying full price to join them were making it possible for the class to exist, or for the class to happen. And now that instructor gets that level of experience, all those students get that level of experience, and then they take that on to their next classes. I can tell you, I'm still running on fuel that I got at classes that I took here in Arizona, before 2009, 2006, 7, and 8. Just the awareness and the having the veil removed to see just how much there is out there for training. I only wish I would have done it more when I was younger, and I could have taken more of it for free when Uncle Sam was paying for it. But it didn't all exist until, kind of like I say, the kind of stuff had to evolve for a while there. All right. Well, with that, I kind of went off on a tangent there with, what to shoot. So I'm not going to be the person that says, don't learn anything cool, because that's weak. That's weak ass sauce. And then I'm not going to say jump right into it, because that's just naive, right? So get into it just like karate. If the kid is saying, I want to learn swords, guess what? You got to learn punching first, and then you can learn some kicking. And once you're kicking people while you're running around the gym or whatever, then we can start talking about some swords. So yes, you can get into where you're learning all that stuff. Anybody who tells you can get into that stuff quick, be hesitant. All right. Were there any other questions? Let's see. Anybody know any good training rifle not banned by Massachusetts? That's a good question. A good training rifle. I think a good training rifle is probably an AR-15 because it's all around and blah, blah, blah. But you're in Massachusetts. So here's what I'm going to say. And this might be a little bit controversial, but lever action will be fine. Because you're in Massachusetts and not too many people are going to bug you about a lever action. The lever actions worked for a long time, very long time, until semi-autos became a bigger thing than they are. But they're not as awesome as a semi for sure. But in a state like Massachusetts, they can make it worth your while. They're not going to bother people as much either, and they're better than a shotgun. But that being said, there's plenty of semis that you can get that probably listening to Cape Gun Works more intently, I would have retained more of them. I know that they've mentioned quite a few of the things that are not AR clones. I think is a scar one of the ones you can have. If you can have a scar, get a scar. I mean, they're not cheap, but scars are solid. They're just too expensive. But that's probably a bad question. So, are there good rifles? Yes. But since I don't know the boundaries, once you find out a couple that are in the realm, feel free to ask me and I'll give you an actual answer because I don't get paid to make you buy one. I have no interest if you buy one or not. I'd rather have you not buy 10 guns that are lame. There's a lot of people that will just tell you to buy whatever because they got nothing else to lose. It's your money. And I mean, I've owned a lot of lame guns. I'm not scared to admit it. I've owned a lot of lame guns just because not where the guns weren't lame necessarily. They just weren't what I wanted, but I was too dumb at the time to just save my money and wait. So I just bought stuff because I could. And yeah, I don't like them. They're lame. So, anyway, I think a lot of people do that, and then they're afraid to talk smack about their own stuff, so they want to justify everything. I'm assuming. I don't know. I have a 12 gauge Winchester, fair priced. I'm not the big fan of shotguns. Like I say, I'm not the same as everybody. I don't think shotguns are that great. There's Gizzard out there. Good evening. I sent out a bunch of invitations yesterday, and then I wasn't able to show up for the show, so didn't send out any invitations or any links today. Let's see. Didn't know that the gun started out as a single shot cannonball. Oh yeah, it started out as a cannon, really. Actually, just a hole in the rock, and they would make it make noise. And then somebody figured out, hey, if I carry around that rock, I can carry it around. So they made it smaller, and then eventually really small. And then they stuck it on a stick, and then it became a gun. As soon as they stuck it on a stick, I think that's the first gun. Let's see. I think everyone should, Tarasan, I think everyone should shoot primarily with both hands, but practice each hand on occasion. You never know when you'll need the skill, like MMA. Learn multiple methods. For sure. But I don't care if you use both hands or not. Use one hand as much as you want. Definitely be able to shoot your gun with both hands. I mean, with either hand and then with both hands. You will shoot better with both hands for sure. But I think your tendency is to shoot with both hands, most people. Let's see, Woods says before he left, all my gun purchases funds will go to finally getting training. All my gun purchases funds will go to finally getting training. Likely start with CCW classes. Likely throw first aid in there too. Trains is far more than guns. So CCW classes, I think of my CCW class experiences, and I've taken maybe 14 of them, I think, as a collection. I recommend doing it, taking CCW classes, especially if they're free. Like take them if you're try to audit the classes, try to get them for free. So you don't need any of their anything. You don't want any of their class materials. You don't need any fingerprinting. You don't need any range time. You're just looking for their instruction. And in return, you'll do a review and you'll help get the word out about their class, right? So hopefully that's a worthwhile arrangement. And then you get to experience the instruction, you get to experience the class, and you get to experience their curriculum. So, what they say, how they say it, and you get to experience the classroom while they're doing all that. You'll meet people in your town who, go to CCW classes, so they're either new or continuing, renewing the permit or something. Or they're just interested, right? Or maybe whatever. So you'll meet some new people, which is always fun. They'll see that there's other people out there. The instructor will get a little bit of feedback from you or whatever. And then you can, like I say, get to see their curriculum and their type of instruction. Now you do that maybe 3 times, and then if I'm crazy, if you don't like it, don't keep doing it. But do it at least 3 times. So I think by then you'd probably figure out what I'm talking about. But the what the instructor decides to talk about, how they decide to talk about it, and then how competent they are. Like, what they want to do and what they're able to do are kind of two different things. So for me, and I suspect for Woods, don't go to the class thinking, I'm here to learn, because you know stuff, you're an adult. You're going there to experience, right? You're going there to see how they do it. Like you're already an accomplished guitarist. You're going there to see how they teach jazz guitar. So if you think of it like that, then you'll probably get something out of a CCW class. But if you go to the CCW class as like, I'm going to try to act like I've never shot a gun before, then I think it just seems like awkward. And I think you're going to end up like a lot of people thinking that the class was boring and lame. But that being said, CCW classes back in my day were much more, here's what we got to do, right? Like, we know you don't need this, but here it is. And nowadays, I know they're a lot more like, you've never touched a gun before, so here it is. And that's needed, right? Because back in the day, nobody bought it. Nobody got a CCW new. You were already a gun person, and then you went to the advanced level to get your CCW. Nowadays, people are like, I'm new, and I'm getting my CCW, which is fine. So you're going to get a different class than before. I don't know if that's going to be fun or not, and then interesting or not. And then as far as the scope of instruction, it's hard to say. A good CCW instructor knows a lot, but only offers enough for the class. Let's put it that way. And if they try to shove too much into a basic class, it can get really awkward and lame. And then, if they just leave a new class sitting there hanging, that can be kind of annoying as well. Hopefully you don't run into anything like that. But that's the thing. That's why I say go to 3. Because if you do run into even 2 like that, then the third one seems like amazing. And if you go to 2 really good ones, usually one of them sucks. The third one will suck, and that'll put you back into reality that it's not all fun and games. So that being said, the CCW classes, I would think of them as at least 3, period. That's what my advice is. First aid, that's a whole nother ball of wax. I don't think you can ever get too much first aid, depending on how much you're interested in it. It's like learning radios, and it's like learning how to grow food. There's no downside other than it takes time away from other things. So as long as it's interesting to you, you're learning something useful. I can't think of any witch doctor stuff out there that's useless. I don't really like Stop the Bleed, but I know a lot of people don't care about it. Or don't care that it's anti-gun like me. But, Stop the Bleed is a good start, I guess. I would say work up to a wilderness first responder. It's below EMT, but it's literally the first thing below EMT, and it's the coolest, highest level thing, at least in my experience, that you can do without having to sign up for being some kind of emergency person, or somebody's not going to look at you weird for having that credential and not being a paramedic. But being a wilderness first responder is more than a first aid class, and then a little bit extra because you're going to be away from a hospital or getting ready for a helicopter or something cool. So, they're going to give you a little bit more than you'd get at a basic class, but a little less than you'd get in any kind of EMT. And it won't be 8 hours of instruction for a 6-month class or whatever. But yeah, you can't get too much first aid ever. It's a lot of fun. And then if you've got the ability or the time, I'd recommend taking an EMT class. It's super cool. You can lord it over everybody that you know more first aid than them. And then trains are more than guns. I like guns better than trains. So there. I'm a month or 2 into training and owning. Right. Let's see. Little puppy is saying I learned from my father with an air pistol when I was probably 6 or 7. I can't actually remember when I learned, but it was before I can remember. It wasn't until my mid-20s trying regular pistols. Bought my first 25 years ago. Now I have 3. Bought 1 I built and 2 rifles I built. Right on. So that's another thing, we're talking firearms training, and I'm sitting here thinking of mostly fighting pistol, some kind of a defensive or fighting type of class, and then a little bit of the knife fighting and a little bit of the verbal judo thing, all fighting though. There's definitely gunsmithing. I guess I kind of mentioned the Glock armorer's course. There's diagnosing, and then there's what's the word? Like there's diagnosing, fixing type of gunsmithing, but then there's also like modifying and stippling and painting and engraving type of gunsmithing also. And you can have a lot of fun with that stuff, or just upgrading parts and stuff like that kind of armorer work. There's quite a few different classes. Back in the day, you'd have to get like unofficial armorers classes, because to get in official, like factory armorers classes, were pretty tough. I think now with as many competition shooters as there are, and the ability of people to just decide not to be an official armorer, they've opened up the requirements or the prerequisites to be an official armorer, I assume. But yeah, again, you have an official armorer certification in your list of accomplishments is also nice. Like you don't have to take nothing from nobody once you're a gunsmith. I only get to the range once or twice a year. That's enough. I've never been in a dust storm. Oh, I'm sorry for you. Watch the movie Dune backwards, and then it's the same as being in a dust storm. Let's see. I'm gonna continue to go to training and keep learning. Right on. When I was in Texas, I was driving and remember the car being covered. When I was younger, I would drive into the dust storms, and then I realized that it's essentially like driving into a big nature's sandblaster. But my cars were bad back in the day. But nowadays, I wouldn't want to do that, because it essentially can just sandblast all the paint off your car when you drive into it. Shooting without sights, I practice shooting from the hip. Point shooting. That's a thing. I don't do it, but I know people, it's a thing. Tara's saying I'm a point shooter, but I learned with old revolvers and like 1911s. Both are perfect for it. And Maria is saying that's what my instructor said. You should eventually be able to hit your target without sights. I hear what you're saying, but just get good at sights. That's what I'd say. Puppy is saying line of sight, and now it's behind it. Yep. Boy, I'll be audited. It's an hour and a half in. I wish I was interested back in the 70s. My dad was teaching my brothers be a pro. Well, see, that's the thing. I don't know. Because we'd have been learning on old-fashioned goofy stuff back in the day, and I'm sure it would have applied to now. But there's a thing. The old people aren't good. They're just still doing it. The good people are randomly old and new. So everybody gets pretty good, and then a couple of people are just really, really good at the moment. Never regretted any class. Gunswatter saying I never regretted any class. All have been worthwhile and fun. Hey, worthwhile fun. Always had good classmates and instructors. Oh, interesting. All right. Well, here's the deal. Let's talk about it. I'm not scared to talk about it. I've had bad instruction. My first CCW was a joke, because it was at a time when we were fighting having to have CCW here in the first place, when we were trying to get constitutional carry. And my CCW instructor was super anti having to do any kind of regulation. So it was not a great class if you were interested in learning things. It was a great class if you just wanted to screw around for the amount of time. So that one, I felt like I needed to still take a class, because that one was not a good class. And that's what started getting me into it a little bit. Plus, I was already doing stuff online, and I had been going to a lot of courses. I guess we could bring that up. After action is a term for having a oh, I guess I need to put the right one in here. After action is having a get together and summary of the events after something has happened, right? To see what it's up. So I've always thought that was a great idea, and not enough people do that. Not enough people look back at what they've already done to learn from it, or just to archive it, right? To write it down. So starting back in the day when I first started going to classes, I started to archive them, and I had the websites here. So it's 2006, 7, 8, 9, before YouTube even started. I was already getting to where if I wanted to go to a class or something, I could tell the instructor, um, like, hey, I'll cover your class on my websites and I'll put links and stuff. Back in the day, that was the equivalent of saying I'll put it on my YouTube. And because there wasn't that many people with websites or anything. So I guess I'm saying I was able to attend quite a few classes. And in that time, aside from a couple of CCW classes, I agree with you. They were all very good. My classes were all very good. But I know people who, and I went to most of the classes free. Like I went to a couple of classes that I paid for over the years, but most of the time I was going free to cover the class, just to watch. So I know people that went to classes that paid good money for them and had very negative experiences. And not because they had bad instruction, as much as the instructors were there to be on stage and performed. So instead of, like, Chris Costa is an example of the opposite. Chris Costa has a great time. He's a really funny dude. He's doesn't take things super seriously. At the time that I was where, we were friends or whatever more, um, he was hanging out in Tucson a lot more often, I guess I should say. So I had a chance to hang out with him much more often. Back then, he was definitely getting wailed on by the internet. And again, if you don't remember this, or if you weren't paying attention back then, uh, there's been times that the internet has decided somebody's a jerk, or like they don't like this person, or this person's going to make fun of them and stuff. And usually when stuff like that happens on a industry or community level, the person getting the abuse books out of there. They leave, right? That's the end of it. And with a couple of people, it's been like, a change in their thing, or they've pivoted to something else. They stuck around, but they've kind of changed their direction or something. But Chris is uh, uh, was again like a pillar. He didn't have to change or nothing. So anyhow, he's an example of a class where I think I've already mentioned that, he's got an actual different thing that he brings to the table. He's all about that. Forget how he describes it, but essentially being quick and using your time for what matters instead of taking what's left after you did something without any strategy. So again, if you've got to go prone and take a shot and you've got 3 seconds to do it, he's going to suggest that you jump around as fast as possible so that you've got 2 seconds to take that shot, instead of farting around for 2.5 seconds getting to the ground so that you have to take a half-second shot. And it's not the best way to do it. It's not the only way to do it, but it is a different way of approaching things. And that's not his only thing, but that's a way to describe Chris compared to somebody else. Masad Ayub does an hour here, or what is it, half a day here, half a day on the range, half a day here, half a day on the range. There's people have their different styles and stuff. So anyway, so that's where I'm getting at, is the people that have had bad instruction have been kind of not satisfied with the amount of instruction versus the amount of just shooting the shit and like, oh, you paid money to be here with me, and I'm just going to hang out. And, you already know how to shoot, so we're not going to put much emphasis on that. We're just going to hang out and shoot guns and look at each other's gear and stuff like that. And for somebody who's going to actually be a student and learn something from the person, and that wasn't understood ahead of time, that it was just going to be a bullshit session with the famous person, then I consider that pretty bad classes. Um, and because the students at the class were all there just to hang out with the famous person, the person I know, the student I know, had just a miserable time because there was two of them that went together to be at this class to experience this person's training, and it turned out to just be this person farting around and being a celebrity, and very little training at all. It was just, the basics, but just the generic basics. Nothing with any kind of extra perspective or insight or anything other than, hey, I'm telling it to you. All right. And I don't know if these are an interesting one or not. We've had a bunch of people hanging out tonight, so thank you. I appreciate the feedback. I do these every once in a while. I decided to do training again because it's been a while since I've talked about it. Like I say, there's definitely people out there that won't listen to this show because they hate training so bad. Like it hurt them. Like training stepped on them or did something mean to them or did something mean to someone in front of them. But somehow training hurt them. And they'll just never like training. And then other people can't get enough of it. Like they just won't shut up about it. And I'm somewhere in the middle. I've definitely enjoyed it. And like I say, for what I've been trying to explain here, for lots of different reasons. Let's see. Worthwhile Fun is saying that's exactly the reason for the channel name. Because again, Gunswater's thing was I've never regretted any class. All have been worthwhile and fun. Right on. Well, I guess if you consider shooting a gun worthwhile fun, then I get what you're saying. Do you mind if I show that testimony today? Because we can chat about that, if you don't mind. I'm going to play that in a minute here. Unless Susan says I can't, I'm going to go ahead and play it, and then you all can watch her testimony, and then we'll talk about a couple of elements of it. Good lover man can beat. Yeah, that's all I'm saying. Like for real, come on. Oh, you just met Worthwhile? You're going to enjoy Worthwhile Fun's channel. Let's see. The puppy is saying, visit more than one shop. Discuss what is available, what they're good for. Go home, do some research, ask people. You'll get a lot of info, probably mind-boggling, but you can narrow it down. That's a great advice too, yeah. You don't need to sign up for anything on the spot, right? Like if a class fills up, oh no, it's going to fill up. Do you care if I just show up and watch then? So, you know what I'm saying? Like you can show up and watch a class. You don't have to be a part of it. And if you go there and they're weird, you go there and they're just joking and laughing the whole time and that's not your style. You go there and they're yelling at each other like drill sergeants or something. Like I wouldn't want to hang out with anything like that. Like you don't have to, you know what I mean? You don't have to pay first and then see. You're allowed to say, hey, do you have some videos of your classes? Can I see what the experience is going to be like? Can you show me the curriculum? I didn't want to get into it, but here's one way to evaluate if an instructor is useful or worthwhile or not. I shouldn't say worthwhile. How about if they're, yeah, I think worthwhile is actually a good word for this one too, though. Ask them if they've got a, what kind of written material you get as a student. I've only been to two classes ever that have 3 classes ever. And I've been to a lot of classes. Let's take a look at how many classes. Let's go back to After Action. Is this on the screen now? Yeah, okay. So if I go back to After Action, let's take a look at how many classes gave me something that I still have pieces of paper. I could do it this way. Let's look at the ones that didn't. Okay, well, actually, Paul may have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, like 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, then maybe 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. I did get something from them. 19. So, like half of these, you don't get any. Oh, shit. I would say a third of them. A third of them, you don't bring nothing home from the class. The problem is at some point I quit going to different classes and I started going to the ones I like, and the ones I like give you handouts. But as I mentioned earlier, there's like legal reasons, there's like real reasons why you'd want to have something after attending a class, and then just in the reality part of it, um, if you want to remember what happened at the class, you know having some kind of handout. So if you talk to an instructor and they go, "Oh, you can download some stuff," just put that in your calculations on where they're at as a what you're going to have 6 months later when you're trying to remember what happened at that class. Puppy is saying, I live in Pennsylvania. A couple of years back, I took CCW class where I could get fingerprinted and photos to apply for a photo or Florida and a Utah. Yeah, that's sort of, I did that too with one of them, which is kind of cool. You can stack your CCWs, in other words. So, we went to a front site one time, and they do a thing where they go, okay, you were just doing a class. So, depending on what class you did, we're just gonna, we're gonna take a look at what CCWs you want, what classes you've already taken, so we know what prerequisites or what requirements you've already accomplished, and then here's what's missing. You want to take these 3 CCW classes or these 3 CCWs from these 3 different states, and this is how much work you've done shooting and qualifying and whatever, just doing your normal class. So for this state, you need to do 2 things: a written test and this. For this state, you need to do a written test and you're good to go. On this state, all you need is a written test, and then so then you'd kind of have this menu, and they'd say, here's all the different CCWs we can offer you, and it was Nevada, Utah, Arizona, some Florida, something east, maybe like, I don't know, Ohio or something. Like there was a couple other ones. And when you look at them, the only thing I needed was Florida. Florida would have gave me Minnesota. Otherwise, my Utah and my Nevada and my Arizona gave me everything that you could get. Like I say, a Florida would have gave me Minnesota. And eventually I did go to Minnesota, but it would have been $135 for the Florida one, and my Utah was something like 50, and the Nevada was something like 85. So at the time, I didn't have an extra 135 for the Florida one. But yeah, when they stack like that, you can get essentially Utah will stack on anything. So if you're applying for your CCW in your state, more than likely you're gonna also accomplish the prerequisites for a Utah CCW. So if your instructor is a Utah CCW instructor and you go get your whatever state CCW, more than likely you also can apply for your Utah and just get your Utah also. Maybe you have to take a second test, but the test is going to be the same kind of stuff. So getting the fingerprints and the photos and everything is a big chunk of it. And if you can get all that stuff at the same time, what is that called? It's cheaper when you do them all at once, type of thing sometimes. So right on. Cool. It says the CCW class, basically checking, going through an index of all the required info, and much of it was a round table of Q&A. Yep, because most of the time it's like driving, you need to know a whole bunch of stuff, but you're going to have to recall any number of things immediately and very, very rarely. So, it's not worth having everybody learn every single thing all the time for the rare instance that anyone's going to need any of it. So the generalities, just you don't have no consequences, right? You always have consequences. There's always laws. Just because you're carrying and able to defend yourself, doesn't mean anything crazy. So usually just go over the basic kind of general stuff. And honestly, if you have gone to a couple of classes, you'll realize that CCW instructors are human beings. And if they are in a classroom with people that are capable and competent, then they just move on. They don't sit around talking about the basics. Usually, sometimes people are really weird about it, but most of the time, if they see that everybody's just competent and capable, they're going to move on to whatever is interesting or might be, even advanced level or, next level at least, intermediate level. So if you go to a class and they don't cover some of the basic stuff, I wouldn't immediately get all concerned. I would look around the room and make sure that nobody's getting left behind. But assuming everybody's up to speed, then like I say, that's usually how they kind of adapt to the students in the room. And hopefully that's what that meant here, is that everybody was capable, so it just turned into a session more than instruction, like lesson thing to just cover basics. Hi, Marie saying I have first aid covered, being in the health field for 4 decades. Right on. Stop the Bleed is anti. I didn't know that. I didn't spend money knowingly supporting antis. I don't think they're antis as much as they like just casually. They're like, oh, look, this puppy has a gun violence or bullet wound. Like, how do you know it's from gun violence? You have a bunch of a-holes. What if it's just a bullet hole from some other reason? But I don't know. I don't like the way they just dismissed everything as gun violence. So to me, that meant subtle anti-gunnery. I don't think they're blatant anti-gun, but it's free, and I'll look for other options. But I'm also not hosting classes or anything. If I was hosting classes and I needed to get people instruction, I'd probably default to their slightly or maybe not slightly anti-gun agenda. And it's not so much that they have an agenda. I guess I shouldn't say it that way either. But I think that they're casually anti-gun, which is either ignorant or complacent. Let's see. Gunswater saying in Pennsylvania, there are no required classes. I think that ups the game. Everybody is there because they want to be there. Yeah, that's a great point. And that's the kind of thing that most people don't think about it. But if anybody's at a class right now, it's because they feel they need it or they want it. Right? Anne Marie is taken off. Get up early. Right on. Well, it'll pretty much end right now. So you'll be at the end of this, or you'll be, uh-oh. He's freaking out, man. What are you freaking out about, puppy? What happened? Something come over here and bite you? You just freaked out. All right. Minimum. What's wrong with you, puppy? Minimum required standard gets you a lot of minimum effort. Yes, you won't. He's not even pulling that tongue in. It's just like, I'm just hanging out with my tongue sticking out. Let's see. My last training was 3 levels of armed church security team member training. Well, then we did have an armed woman group do Milo Simulator. I don't know what that is, or maybe I do, but I don't know what it's called. I don't mind, but don't use your audience over it. Don't lose your audience. Oh, watching the video? Oh, no. I think it's going to be interesting. Because it is out there. Let's see. Where I live, Puppy is saying, where I live, the only thing I got locally between Utah and Florida, I forgot which one gave it to me, was to be able to go to Delaware concealed. Oh, okay. Land jacked. You sound like you're in a situation that Rick from Rick's Life as I See It, or whatever he's called now, is he was in Rhode Island, and he had to have something like 7 CCWs in order to just move around. Yeah, I hear that. I don't want to talk smack about New Jersey, but I can understand not wanting to go to it. All right, here's what I'm going to do. We're kind of caught up. We still got some people. You're in for a treat. not because of this isn't a treat. We're going to go over to my subscriptions and go back to a little while ago, 5 hours ago. And there's a couple of interesting things here. So this is about 8 minutes long, and this is I'm just going to screen share it so you don't have to look at it through my camera here. This is Worthwhile Fun, who's been in the chat here tonight. This is her testimony at Missouri State House of Representatives. Yeah, House of Representatives, and it's an interesting It's a good testimonial, but it is also got some points that I'm going to bring up 2 hours, 2 hours into this show, but I don't care. I'll probably bring it up in a second video, a separate video, if you're okay with that also. So I'll bring it over here. We'll make it full screen and listen to it.
Make sure you submit your witness form, state your name, proceed when you're ready.
I submitted one earlier and online, overachiever. Thank you, Chairman, members of the committee, and special guest. Susan Myers of the 131st, also 2.5 hours away. As a woman who concealed carries and volunteers my time to help educate and train other women in the use of firearms, I have to tell you that I find the concept of gun-free zones to be repugnant. You disarm us in the name of imaginary safety, leaving us without adequate means of self-defense should we face a threat. A threat, mind you, that does not and will not obey any law you might conceive and subject the rest of us to.
That is such an effective opening statement there. And I got to give it to Missouri for giving a video from one angle of you testifying, but then also, and you can kind of see who's behind you to see their deal. But really, you can see all these representatives here and their focus on what you're saying. I don't know about this guy. Is he even a person? I think he is. Every person here has got eye contact with you, and they're leaning forward as if to give a shit about what you're saying. They're either acting really good or they're actually paying attention, except for blonde lady and red tie over here. But that's my first perceptions of it. And that first 50 seconds, I mean, I don't think you could have picked more effective words. It wasn't like too much, but it was also like 100% useful words.
Every time a woman has to take public transit, this restrictive policy forces them to be unarmed, not just while on that bus or train, but throughout her day. This is wrong, and this ban, along with many others, needs to be lifted. With the Supreme Court's Bruin decision last June, we were reminded that many of these sensitive places carry bans will likely not withstand the text and history tests they need to pass in order to not be found in violation of our Second Amendment.
So now you lost. Red tie was never paying attention. This dude's, hopefully he's playing with his phone or something down there. This guy playing with his phone. This guy playing with his phone. She's playing with her hair. She's still not paying attention. But you've still got 1, 2, 3, 4 definitely paying attention.
It is my hope that both chambers of this legislative body will finally see the time as right and get out in front of an eventual SCOTUS ruling on gun-free zones. There will be arguments put forth in strenuous opposition to this bill. Let me remind the committee and everyone testifying that interest balancing was undertaken by our founders, who then proceeded to include the Second Amendment as written. As such, interest balancing of perceived public safety concerns outweighing the right of an individual is no longer an allowable excuse to infringe upon our unalienable rights. So let me bring this back to why I'm here. 27% of female fire owners have used a firearm in self-defense. We are not defenseless females. That is, except when you disarm us.
Ouch. That was excellent. So it looks like you got her back from playing with her hair. This dude's still here. This guy's still here. This guy's still here. This guy smiled a bunch of times. The lady in the back is there to keep records. Oh, okay. So she's not, she doesn't count. So, and this guy's paying attention now. So you got everybody's attention. This guy looked up when you go, except for when you disarm us. So I think you brought up good points there, because these are a bunch of sexists who think that all females are just victims only. And I think you challenged them there. And then you got all their eyes at that last point there.
Thank you. And was I the one you?
And that was the end of your testimony, I guess, period. So that was a great way to end it with we're not victims until you disarm us. That was excellent.
Wanted to mention the number of states. You said the word expert, and that threw me. So I thought someone else was here. As of last year, before Bruin, I wondered, and I had to go and look up each state's restricted location.
So this is the state of Missouri, a state where there's been riots and a bunch of concern, and a state where you've had reactive laws. This is a state that's got, right now you're testifying for CCW on public transportation. They're trying to outlaw, they're trying to infringe CCW on public transportation, with the implication that criminals are going to see that you're not allowed to carry on a bus and say, oh, I'm not going to carry on the bus anymore. Or criminals are going to get charged for having a gun on the bus, and that gun charge is going to stick in this case, even though it's the first case dropped, first charges dropped almost always. And we know that from literally from history. It's a state where all kinds of stuff have been going on. And in reality, we see how many people in this room. Well, Susan can tell us how many people were in this room with her, but we see her having testimony to one guy who's kind of paying attention with the red tie, blue tie here, beard, hair, guy who smiled, guy who was playing with his phone a minute ago. You can see the evidence of it in his right hand right here. Guy who's still playing on his phone, other beard guy, and then the other guy who's paying attention the whole time. So what are we talking? 3, 6, 9 people are responsible for making this decision for the committee that they're going to bring to the rest of the House. And Susan is the one person. This is civic, period. This is it. This is what civics is. This is individuals taking time, influencing the opinion of 9 people who are going to influence however many, 100 or something. And that's going to be the results of this. So I don't know if I didn't see anything in the comments or anything, but like how many moms were there, how many Bloomberg employees were there, so to speak, and how many people were there on your side. Well, what I see is Susan got there on her own time, took her own time to get there, paid for herself to be there, and then got herself prepared and, got here and then did it. And now is hanging out talking about it hours after. Anyway, so that was the part where she did her testimony, and now somebody had asked a question and she was providing some follow-up with details from someone else's testimony, I think.
Only 3 states before Bruin restrict.
I don't know why you're calling it Bruin. Call it the New York State Rifle and Pistol Association. But all right, go ahead. I guess you can call it Bruin since you're the one there and everything.
Did carry on public transit: Missouri, New Mexico, and Illinois. And then you can throw in DC, but they're not a state. After Bruin, then you get the.
Even though you're calling it Bruin, the way you casually own the knowledge and disseminate it here is what the DC project is all about. These people, these representatives, require information from competent sources, and Susan is offering that competence right here. One person showing up in front of 9. Seems like all we need to do is get 9 more Susans and we win, right? Per state. So that's like 450 people and we win. That should be pretty simple.
Likes of New York, New Jersey, Hawaii, and others, scrambling to be like Missouri. And that really bugs the snot out of me. So
So a couple of them smiled. And I don't think that argument's going to work if they want to be the blueprint for tyranny or whatever they'd call it, the blueprint for infringement or whatever, right? Like that's the only thing I would give you a critique on there. They'd probably dig that.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions from the members of the committee?
This is the part where I wanted to bring it up because this restart to get they started to hork my gears.
Representative Johnson.
Thank you for your testimony
Yes,
today.
ma'am.
What is your experience with public transit? Do you use public transit
Have you ever had a broken arm? Well, if you haven't had a broken arm, what are you going to tell me about having? Like, what the hell kind of question is that? What the hell was that? My phone just made a weird noise. Hold on. Huh. I think my phone just made that weird noise at me. Okay, I think I was going to read these comments. All right, blind lady's there to keep records. Not happy with that last election. Thought we, I don't know what that's all about. Not very good job. Or anyway, Gunswater is saying very good job speaking. Thank you very much for saying that because I agree. Let's see. Worthwhile Fun is now saying all but the 4 Dems on the committee will pass the bill. So attention or not, they'll vote right. All but the 4. Okay, so you're saying the ones that aren't paying attention just don't care because they're voting for you and they don't need to hear you tell them why. That's fine. Actually, 1 Dem on this committee has voted for the bill. That's good to hear. No moms yesterday. They had been there the day before for rallying photos. Oh, okay. That's lame. So did they get more turnout or was it the same 9 people in the committee from the representatives? Like, were there more representatives turned out for that, for the Moms Demand photo op? Okay, so the question you were just asked is, how can you tell us about rights when you've never even driven a bus before?
I do not. And so, but I did not feel the need that I had to go and write it in order to be here because I have kind of taken it upon.
First off, you could have just been like, and walked off because that lady had no right, no business suggesting that you have to ride a bus to understand to have empathy for people who ride a bus.
Kind of taken it upon myself to be the female firearm enthusiast voice on every firearms bill that comes up around here because I saw that there was a lack of that. And with the work I do with a couple of nonpartisan organizations that have to do with women in firearms, I have met a lot of women, and so I put myself in their situation.
Right on. She's explaining why she's there. And look at how many of these people are listening to every word she's saying. And how many of them have to. How many of them are choosing to versus how many of them feel some obligation or because they're constituents. Susan just told us that the people who are already voting for her were half the ones looking at their phones. So the ones that are here for her have no constituents that care what we're doing right here. And the ones that are against, no, that are for the bill is to allow. So the ones that are against the bill, you would think are going to try to act like whatever she's saying is nothing. So they're going to be looking at their phones right now. But instead, it looks like, I don't know who's who in here, but I can tell you that this guy is paying attention. He sat down. He wasn't even here before. She came back and sat down and she's paying attention. She's at least being courteous, if not intent. This guy, I'm pretty sure, is the guy that's about to rag on you. And he's being at least polite and gracious. He's listening. He's certainly listening to everything you're saying. I'm sure he's about. I think he's the guy who's about to rag on you, though. I don't know her deal. She's at least stopped playing with her hair, though. And then this guy, he's smiling like he's glad you're there. This guy, I feel like this guy is honestly glad you're there, speaking his mind for him. That's what I'm getting out of that guy's face. This guy's been paying attention the entire time, so I'm assuming it's something similar. And this guy, every once in a while, looks up from whatever he's playing with behind the table there. And I don't know if he works there or if he's supposed to be there. And this guy, who's been playing on his phone off and on, stopped. This guy playing on his phone half the time stopped. And this guy has been listening for a while now. This guy's also been listening. So every one of them is like listening to this part where you essentially said, I'm here for the ladies that aren't represented typically on these things.
I testified a couple weeks ago on an anti-red flag bill because of the women I know coming from domestic violence who have had red flags used against them to disarm them by their abuser. So I haven't been.
So what you did is explain why you're there so often as a champion for these bills as a female. And you mentioned that red flag laws have been used against the victims by the abusers. And you couldn't have been more clear. You said that the red flag laws have been used as weapons by the abusers against the victims.
And abused domestically either, but I did not feel apologetic for speaking on that as well.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
So you were explaining why you were here to speak about the points that the last person had asked you about, and now they're going to ask you if there's any other questions about riding on public transportation with concealed carry.
Additional questions?
This guy.
Representative Brown.
Thank you. Good evening.
Hiya.
I don't know what the term for this bullshit is, but this is bullshit. This is flim flam. You are too effective. We need to divert the conversation and slander, or whatever the word is.
And thank you for being here.
Yes, sir.
I really understand what you say about a woman having a concealed carry because I know a lot of women who do carry concealed weapons. Now, you heard me mention about being a school teacher, and I'll admit, as a school teacher, I actually knew teachers who brought guns to school in their purse, okay, because they didn't feel safe.
As someone who trains women, I am not a fan of purse carry. I won't tell them they absolutely can't do it, but I can work with them and give them much better.
Yeah, I can always think back to my first.
See, that's what happens when you're a gun nerd. So that's going to happen. Probably shouldn't have done that because this guy isn't tracking. He's a shark. He's coming in for the kill right now.
First year of teaching school when I was teaching at Westport Middle School.
He's trying to be nice.
We got metal detectors maybe about 2 or 3 weeks after school had started. And the first day we put in metal detectors, we found 5 guns in the bushes. And we're talking about 6th, 7th, 8th graders carrying guns. And so the gun-free zone actually made a lot of teachers feel safer because there you're encouraged not to have guns, whereas this legislation encourages you to carry a gun.
So first he says, hey, let's agree on these gun-free zones are going to make people feel safer because I know ladies who have guns.
My answer to you on all those type things is interest balancing.
Yeah.
Again, I won't apologize for someone else's feeling good or bad about something should not disarm me. And that's just where I'm at on it. So.
Well, no one's going to try to disarm you.
So here's this little pander.
I heard you talk about.
It's a Class D felony if.
Well, when I
if
say
a
disarm,
woman in a dangerous neighborhood or who has a active stalker, she would have to decide to take the bus to get to and from work, to carry, to have a means to defend herself, or face a Class D felony if she gets caught. Yeah, I think you're disarming somebody.
Bam! If this was a sword fight and this sucker just came at you with some kind of big ass sword, you just flung his sword across the room, and now you got his sword, you're pointing your sword up against his throat. And he's all like, what? Like, what? That was awesome. So now, like, typical politician, let's see what happens here.
So you were talking about domestic abuse.
Boom! Let's villainify you. Let's associate you with bad guys.
Did you know in the state of Missouri, if you are convicted of domestic abuse, you can own a firearm, even though federal law says you can't.
Bullshit, liar. So first off, you lost really bad. It was sad how bad you lost. And now the only thing you can do is lie and try to change the subject into like some kind of lie bill, whatever's going on here.
In Missouri, you can.
On a misdemeanor charge,
Yeah.
correct? I don't know what specifically that misdemeanor charge is. If it's a bad enough charge, make it a felony. Fix it that way.
You see, I've got a bill out there that will, it just mirrors the federal law that says if you've been convicted, you can't have this firearm. And I always say that the only person that should be fighting me on this is a wife beater. Wife beaters are the ones that should be fighting me on this, not the legislature.
What an asshole. So it's like, okay, I lost. Let me get a jab in there. Oh, I lost even worse, and I lost my sword, and I look like a punk. I know. I'm gonna say wife beater a bunch of times. What an asshole.
Sure.
Well, I don't think a misdemeanor should make you lose your gun rights. But like I said, I don't know the specific crime that has been acted upon a woman or a woman acted upon a man, whatever that is. If it's bad enough, make it a felony.
Yeah. Well, in my opinion, domestic abuse on a woman is terrible.
Ugh.
Okay. And I don't know why you would allow an abuser to own a firearm in the state. It makes no sense to me.
I assume it's because of the misdemeanor.
It makes no sense. So I appreciate you being here. Thank you.
Thank you.
Additional questions? Thank you very much for your testimony. I appreciate it.
What a lame dude. So that was pretty awesome. He did listen. At least he acted like he listened. He was being a nice guy as he was listening or whatever. But then the end there, he just got wailed on by you. And then I guess because he's such a wuss, he just decided to say wife beater a bunch of times. So interesting. Thanks for being there. 7 minutes. How long did it take you to get there versus how long did it take you to get home versus how long were you sitting there for 7 minutes and 59 seconds worth of testimony? You don't have to answer, but everybody knows she was sitting there for hours, and it took her hours to get there and hours to leave. And then that whole time she was not doing whatever she does for a living or hanging out with her family or just enjoying guns or whatever she'd rather be doing. So thank you very much for doing that for all of us and for the people that come next, because that's who you're doing it for. We all know that. So yeah, that was an extra piece at the end there. Thought that was pretty good. Thanks for posting that. I keep saying this. Back when I was a kid, when I was this puppy's age, we had Annie Oakley. Well, we had Annie Oakley. There might have been you know who else there was? The Terminator, the mom from Terminator. And I don't know who else a girl would have looked up to. Maybe like Kim Rhodes or somebody. You know, the Olympic medalists. There's a couple of Olympic medalists I guess I'm 2 clicks away from them. But there wasn't that many female people in the gun community, females. And now little girls got people like Worthwhile Fun to look up to. It's going to be a different world going forward. And these politicians, what are they? They're listening to the, future politicians are listening to this. So they're going to know that, I guess I got to drink something. we'll have to end this because I don't have anything else to drink. These future politicians that are watching this are going to know they either have to come in with to do some actual work, bring something to the table that actually accomplishes something, or they're just not even going to show up. So you're not just a role model, but you're also challenging the politicians of tomorrow that they can't just show up and bully people. This was obvious as shit that guy didn't have any idea of what he was really talking about, was throwing jargon at you, was throwing boilerplate at you. And then as soon as he figured out that he was ended, that you parried every one of his lame attacks, he had to resort to calling names and accusations that were unfounded, just lame accusations. Totally weak, totally weak. 2.5 hours each way, 12 hours at the Capitol. Holy shit. You're saying you were at the Capitol for 12 hours and 5 hours of driving? That's awesome. Thank you for that. All right. Well, it was easy for me to sit here and talk about it. I'm just sitting here petting my dog and talking about it on the internet, but you actually did all the work. So thanks for that. We talked about training tonight, and here's the thing. Training is like learning the guitar or whatever. A lot of people are, it's just like learning a gun. It's like literally, you can buy the gun and you can take it to the range and you can get really good at shooting it at the center of the paper. But an elk isn't the center of a paper. Like a trophy isn't the center of a paper. It's a center of a paper in the wind, after a rain at a place that you had to drive to. Like there's always going to be more to it. So having the item and practicing with it is one thing, but getting advice from an expert, getting coaching, and not just watching. Anybody can watch a baseball game. Like everybody watches baseball and football. Is everybody really good at baseball and football because they watch the games all the time? So watching training is one thing. Paying an instructor to coach you is playing it, like it's doing it. It's not just watching it, it's participating in it. So there's no way to explain that to anybody who hasn't done it before. But people are going to, there's always going to be that hurdle. Once you've hit that threshold, though, and you start to enjoy and start to experience shooting or training and start to experience it a little bit, it can be a lot of fun. It can add layers and depth to your shooting that you never even thought of before. Think about being a gunsmith. Once you're a gunsmith, you never look at a gun the same way again. Once you can play a guitar really well, you don't look at guitars the same way anymore, right? So you're adding more to your experience, your level of experience and stuff. You're able to offer more when you have conversations or when you're bringing stuff to the next, to your whatever friends and family, when you're dealing with stuff. All right. So again, thanks everybody. You're kind of getting some comments here from the politician there at the end there. Problem with politicians like him, who's what the platform says, believes it. I don't know if they believe it, and that's the thing. You can kind of tell when you're there, but sometimes, but not always. I've also seen people with so much makeup and weirdness and just time on the clock with their poker face that it is hard to tell. But if it is just his platform, I mean, he's certainly listening to you. He must have understood your position, that when you brought up, when Susan brought up the idea that when you prohibit a lady from carrying on public transportation, that means she cannot carry on her way to work. You've also disarmed her at work. You don't just disarm her on the bus, you disarm her wherever she's going. And you brought that up, and that sunk into that guy. He heard that. He may have regurgitated his boilerplate party line because he felt some obligation, or he thought maybe that would bully you away and you'd never come back again or something. But glad it didn't. But He really did look like he was listening. And that's all you can ask, is for the other side to understand our position. Even if it's just so that they can come up with a challenge to that position, at least they've understood, because that means the people that are listening and the people that are paying attention are also understanding, right? That's what's changing the game. That's what's changing the playing field. Here's one last thing I'll throw out here before we leave. If you're listening to this in the future, if you're listening to this tonight, how come nobody's talking about Washington other than to try to keep score? How come nobody's talking about New Jersey or Massachusetts or what's happening in California? We only hear about the court cases when they're about to break, or when they've just broke, or when they're being launched. There's more to it than that. We can be doing a lot more. We don't have to be satisfied with observing. This is 2023. We have a participatory internet that allows us to do things both ways. Our national level organization should be more multitasked, or we should have more of them. But don't be complacent, and don't think that we have to stop with where we are. Take some inspiration and some motivation from Susan's testimony right now that we just watched, and get in the game. Value your voice. We'll be back tomorrow to wrap up the week with what everybody else has been doing this week. I've been pretty busy. I missed one of our own shows this week. We do have Free Patch Friday tomorrow, so I'll end this thing with a commercial for our store. I guarantee you're going to get more free patches from us than anybody else. I brought a bunch of patches home from SHOT Show. I keep buying patches from people, and our Free Patch Friday stuff is growing. So purchase stuff from our store. It keeps our bills paid and allows us to keep working on stuff like this. And some of it's pretty cool stuff. And like I say, you'll get tons of free patches when you order on Fridays. Actually, when you order anytime, we're going to give you free patches. So with that, we'll wrap this one up and give the puppy a pat on the head for everybody. We'll see you in the morning or tomorrow. And I had the thing all queued up and then I clicked off. GearWebsites.com is your source for firearms-based playing cards and books. We also have mugs, shirts, and posters with designs that we've made live. Of course, we have patches. Every Friday is Free Patch Friday. We appreciate your support. Thank you for shopping at GearWebsites.com.